Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to this week's episode of The Niche Cast. We are from The Niche Cache, theniche-cache.com, home of big old hefty Aotearoa sporting yarn and kōrero. Got a couple of fresh things live on the website. Got a Kiwi-NRL Breakers free agency breakdown. Also whipped up a thing about the Auckland City Wellington Olympic football rivalry, which is live on the website. Got the weekly Flying Kiwis, got a Warriors versus Bulldogs preview. And ahead of this week's Broncos versus Redcliffe Dolphins fixture, I would also recommend reading up on the Kiwi-NRL Dolphins and how all those players from Aotearoa have impacted a winning Dolphins team to start the season. That is to say, always something fresh and intriguing to read on our website, theniche-cache.com. Bit of a warm-up kōrero here, Nico the Wildcard. I am curious about the basketballing situation in Aotearoa. Things are humming along. We had the Breakers. I was going to say the NBA, but things aren't humming along for the Kiwi NBA Jokers, although you're basically Woj because you are Sean Marks's like PR department. So big up yourself. You do love a bit of Sean Marks and his mahi with the Brooklyn Nets. But I am curious because I did check in with your free agency breakdown of the Kiwi basketball players in the NBL. And I'm just curious, like, what's next? What's like some short-term stuff for Kiwi basketball folks to tap in with? Because of course, Charlize Leger-Walker her tournament didn't go so well. So I think she's knocked out of that NCAA tournament, if I'm correct. So what are some short-term Kiwi basketball things for people to check in with?
Yeah, not the March Madness stuff. As you say, Charlize Leger-Walker had I'd say a bit of a shocker, but it wasn't specifically like she just turned up and played terrible. I think she got into foul trouble. They targeted her. They had scouted her, made it tough to get to her shots, and she did miss a few shots, and then the team just fell behind, and it was a bit of a disastrous game. She fouled out, but also their second best player also was in foul trouble and missed large stretches of it. So one best forgotten and just focus on the 12 tournament championship instead there. But even aside from that, I was going through to see like there weren't that many Kiwi men or women that made it to the tournament, which is always a rare thing each season. But I mean, Ben Gold and Marquette did get a nice win in the first one. I think he had a couple of assists and like a few nice minutes out there on the court, but then they got upset in the second round, so they're out. So there's not really anything to get fussed about. Tane Murray doesn't play a heap for Virginia, but they also got upset in the first round. So that stuff not so good. NBA, as you say, not so good. Steven Adams is out injured at the moment, and Sean Marks is just counting down the days to the off season when you can actually do something. Having cleared the decks, like he set the table ready to do stuff, you just can't do anything until the free agency or the trade window and stuff like that open up again. So however, coming and swooping in at the perfect time just when we really need it, the New Zealand NBL, the local stuff starts off in 2 weeks, early April, so there's that. Not sure when the Tauihi starts, but it'll be a little bit later than that. There was the women's NBL did actually just finish, and Charlize Leger-Walker's team, not Charlize, Chris Leger-Walker's team, Townsville Fire champions. So they won her first season as a pro. She won. Backup, sort of a backup point guard. So she didn't get huge minutes. She had a couple really nice games throughout the season when injuries allowed her a bigger role, but still part of a championship winning team. That's always big work. And then little more like midterm vision. There is a men's World Cup in I think August coming up, and the Tall Blacks have already announced they've got some warm up games before that. They're going to do like an invitational tournament against Germany, China, and Canada. So some tough opposition there. Anytime like Tall Blacks at World Cups is always exciting because there's the precedent set 20 years ago for what that can look like. And you're always going to get the lads just like 100%. Everyone's absolutely fizzing to represent their country kind of thing. There's just a different, I don't know, let's call it Tall Blacks Mana, just to keep a regular theme of ours. Like it definitely fits into that category. love watching the Tall Blacks at these big tournaments. And here's another one. And there's also, I mean, they're obviously not going to win the World Cup or anything like that, but there is the little carrot on a stick dangling out there. If they do finish ahead of Australia, like get ranked higher than Australia because of their performance at the World Cup, then they will get the Oceania qualifying spot for the Olympics as well, which is next year. So it's been tough work. It's not easy to finish ahead of a very good Australian team that turns up to these things expecting to win medals and stuff. But if they have a shocker and we sneak through the group stage and whatever, there is that opportunity. If not, it's like Olympic qualifying tournaments that'll take place probably early next year, but those are extremely difficult to win. So, but Tall Blacks basketball either way is always good, and that's coming up later in the year. So it's which also I guess puts some perspective on NBL free agency as well as the Kiwi NBL stuff. It's like what are dudes doing in the meantime? There's a few fellas still over in Europe playing. Competition for places in that squad is going to be absolutely feisty, like feistier than it's ever been before. There's a lot of depth, and especially like several young dudes who haven't necessarily been there. Every time you see the Tall Black squads get named, it's like vastly different from squad to squad because there's that many players, but there's also like so and so's unavailable because of club duties here, and so such and such is injured. So bringing that down and condensing it into like I think it'd be a 12-man roster. Brutal work for Pero Cameron to do. Brutal work.
Big up to the Patreon whānau for supporting the Niche Cage and all our content. Patreon is the best way to support the Niche Cage directly, support the website, support the podcast, support the email newsletters. Straight up the guts, direct between yourself and the Niche Cage. And we've got extra podcasts for the Patreon whānau every week. On a Monday, I'm doing a Kiwi-NRL Spotlight video for the Patreon whānau. And of course, we got our regular Tuesday Blackcaps podcast about the Blackcaps. That is there every week for the Patreon whānau. So we've got 2 extra podcasts on our Patreon feed. We do love to have a little kōrero with the Patreon whānau and engage with those who support our mahi directly. So big up the Patreon whānau. And if you're listening to this, and if you enjoy the mahi and you want to support the mahi, and head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/our Niche Cage, EL Niche Cage. Sign up, boom, easy to make it. Email newsletter comes out via Substack, thenichecage.substack.com. You subscribe every Monday and Friday, you're getting fresh Kiwi sports words sent straight to your inbox. This Friday, there'll be lots of Kiwi-NRL notes, probably be some Kiwi cricket notes and whatever else you need to preview for the Kiwi weekend sport. We come back on Monday. Guess what we're doing? We're recapping the weekend of Kiwi sport. We're reliable. We show up every Monday and Friday evening for you, and we're there for you with some nuggets, some bits and bobs about Aotearoa sport via our email newsletter, thenichecage.substack.com, and of course the website, theniche-cage.com, where we go deep into the mangroves about Aotearoa sport. We always start podcasts with a dose of mindfulness. What do you got?
Well, it feels like one of those lucky dip dates. So I was going to do the same trick we did a couple of weeks ago where I got which I realized looking at it, it's called Rumi Day by Day. So it's old mate, what did I say he was? Like Persian or something, poet Rumi from way back when. And there's actually 365 things in here, I realized, because it's day by day. You're meant to have a pearl of wisdom per day. So pick a number between 1 and 365 and I'll give you that day's pearl of wisdom.
211.
211 serves up a bit of stop trying to be shrewd and allow yourself to be bewildered, because shrewdness leads to skepticism, but when you are bewildered, you'll be gifted the clarity of sight. Bit of a longer one, but there's something in there.
I'm just trying to be bewildered.
It's a good place to be. Clarity of sight comes from bewilderment, apparently.
And I old Rumi might not have been in tune with the mindfulness, gratitude, aspects of spirituality, but I assume if you're bewildered,
I think he probably was.
If you're bewildered, then you're highly likely to be. Let me say this. Let me add my own scientific twist to it. It's easier to access gratitude through bewilderment. What was the
I
other
agree
one?
with that.
What was
Um,
his juxtaposition?
Something that leads to skepticism, shrewdness.
Shrewdness. It's a big old boulder in front of the gratitude cave,
It's
right?
not
Bewilderment,
easy to roll away.
bewilderment. You're tapping on that boulder, it moves itself. Height of my gratitude, height of my Kiwi sport, because these are really interesting Kiwi sporting times. Funky time of year, but this weekend in particular is pretty exciting. So exciting. We're pumping the rugby league segment into the A block of the podcast. We got Warriors versus Bulldogs, and this is a fascinating weekend of rugby league because we got Warriors versus Bulldogs, and we've got the Broncos versus the Dolphins. So most of the preseason stuff and coming into the season of rugby league, I've talked a lot about measuring the Warriors against the Broncos and the Bulldogs. We've, in previous podcasts, we've discussed the connections. So we don't need to go over all the connections again, but that is to say you can go through and you can listen to all the different bits and bobs linking how I came up with this kind of measurement system and these comparisons. And here we are, monster weekend of rugby league, and we've got the Warriors playing the Bulldogs in all three grades, and we've got this Broncos versus Redcliffe Dolphins matchup. Obviously, Redcliffe Dolphins, they're not in this triangle of my own rugby league oddities, but they do have an immense Kiwi-NRL presence. The Redcliffe Dolphins, right now, they've got a heartier Kiwi-NRL presence than the Broncos. So we'll get into that game. We'll get into some other rugby league games, but just want to preview some of this Warriors versus Bulldogs stuff because all three grades are playing against the Bulldogs. The Warriors have, this is the third time the Warriors have had one of these club days as I'm anointing that. They defeated the Knights 2-1. In NRL, they had a win. I think they had a New South Wales Cup win and they lost SG Ball. So they went 2-1 up over the Knights. Against the Roosters, they went down 1-2. Now they're coming into a series against the Bulldogs, which is even more interesting because we know the Bulldogs under Phil Gould, they are building out their Kiwi-NRL development pipeline. Not a huge presence in their lower grades this weekend. And although the NRL team has one of the funkiest Kiwi-NRL lads in their team, Hayes Perham at fullback. He returns to Aotearoa. He returns to the Warriors. And I'd also highlight Carl Olowapu. He's on an extended bench for the Bulldogs. He's starting halfback for New South Wales Cup Bulldogs. So you would have heard about him in the off-season, how he left Queensland, the Bulldogs paid the transfer fee, and he's only a young teenager. He's a starting half for New South Wales Cup Bulldogs, and he's on the extended bench for the NRL Bulldogs. Don't think he will play this game, but I do suspect he will play NRL footy at some stage this season. Who knows where his eligibility future lies, but he is a Randwick junior out of Wellington. So just keep an eye on that. Obviously, the Bulldogs also have Raymond Faitala Mariner. They've also got Fa'amanu Brown, one of my favourite rugby league players. He's still enjoying that comeback journey. So that's the Bulldogs, but the Warriors NRL team, as far as selection goes, Nickel Clockstar is back at fullback, replacing Tain Tuapiki. You've got Jackson Ford returns as an edge forward. Mitch Barnett is out, which is quite interesting. I'll get on that in a second. You've got Freddie Lussick coming in at hooker for Wade Egan. Lussick isn't as good as Egan, but he has a very similar style. Kind of drifts out of dummy half. He's a good passer. He's not fast. He's not dynamic, but they do have a bit of crafts. They might pop out a dummy half one way, pass the other way. They might engage a few defenders, then pass. Like, they are quite crafty out of dummy half. So I don't expect too much of a drop-off there with the Lussick. The Barnett one is really interesting because I view him as a leader of Warriors' physicality, aggression. Like, he is the leader of all that stuff. He's always willing to put a shot on. You still have other players like who are going to do that. Manati Niokore is going to do that. Marcelo Montoya is going to destroy anyone out the back that he wants to. Edward Kossi does that. Jazz Tavang is always going to put a shot on. So there are lots of players who can do that, but I've viewed Mitchell Barnett as the leader in that regard, and he's out this weekend. But it's just a solid Warriors return to Mount Smart.
Has Marcelo Montoya always been such a like back-breaking kind of player? Like I remember him. Where was he before? He's at the Dogs, eh? So you can understand that playing for the Bulldogs in that particular era, especially, might overshadow some of your better abilities. Like you might not get to shine on all of that. But also remember him playing for the Warriors early on in his time there and against the Dragons, and Michele Ravalawa just scoring a nice easy hat trick against him, just head to head, beating him 3 times on the line. But I don't know, like this season in particular, you see him out there doing those like Manu Vedavai, Ken Mamalo runs quite a lot and just like crunching into dudes. Has he just like bulked up, or is it a change in coaching style, or is it just pure like, it almost feels like it's just a matter of confidence. Like he feels he's got a solid place and now he can just like do a little bit more than play with that reservation of being worried about errors. He's out there trying to like enforce errors from the other team kind of thing.
Nothing's changed. Like,
same dude.
Marcelo Montoya has always ran ridiculously hard. That's always been a constant figure of his footy. He's all like, Ed Kosi and Montoya have said it before, like, and this is interesting with the Bulldogs because I've seen some stuff about the Bulldogs shape where they might have, like, it was on the Matty John's podcast, Cooper Cronk, and they were talking about how they, Coach Serraldo moved Matty Burden outside Viliami kickout. So instead of the half being inside kickout, so Burden just gets the ball, probably passes to kickout or passes to someone else. What they did to get Burden more involved as a runner was the ball gets to kickout, then it gets to Matt Burden, and he can pounce on an over-eager defender who bites in on kickout. If that is slow, if that is a bit disjointed, Edward Kosi is coming at your ribs. And it's the same on the other edge. Like Montoya's coming at your ribs. That Ravalawa stuff, you got to chill out. Like Ravalawa runs over the top of anyone. Like Montoya didn't do anything wrong in that game off the top of my head. Like you're one-on-one with Ravalawa.
He is a good finisher.
You're getting run over. It's not a finishing thing. Like he's a steamroller. That's what's happening. And if Marcelo Montoya was running at Ravalawa, one-on-one, you might get a similar result. Like you're judging a winger off their defense. Like I don't like that.
Well, it's not the entirety of the judging. It's just a memory that sprung to mind. I think it's probably, players always look better when they're playing in winning teams, don't they? And the Warriors, we don't know if they're going to be a full-on winning team, but they're clearly a more functional side than they have been, right?
Yeah, like that specifically, everyone's playing with more energy.
Yeah,
everyone's more aggressive. Like that's why it was an impressive loss against the Roosters, because everything they've shown in all 3 games has been energy, intensity, vigor, aggression, physicality. Now we're seeing the level of skill across all 3 games as well. You've got passing forwards. I didn't specifically write about Tohu Harris for today's preview, but like he's obviously the best player in the Warriors. He's probably the best player on the park in this game. Like he's playing 80 minutes. He's making the most tackles in the NRL. He's making the most tackles more efficiently than anyone else. And he's one of the best ball-playing middle forwards in the league. So the only other players you can compare Tohu Harris to is Yo for the Panthers, maybe Cameron Murray with the Rabbitohs, maybe a Victor Radley type of player for the Roosters. Taumalolo is different, but same kind of influence on a game. So I do want to say that like Tohu Harris is operating in his different gravy right now, top notch, elevated mahi. Like Tohu Harris is shining on all levels, and it's a beautiful thing. And there is like, do want to say this with my full chest full confidence. Like Toe Harris will probably be the best player on the field against the Bulldogs. But the Warriors, so that skill element, like the passing forwards, because if Toe Harris isn't doing it, Dylan Walker's doing it. And Dylan Walker's basically a half playing as a prop. And that's quite useful. Adam Fanua-Blake's got a little passing game. Then you get to Martin and Johnson. They've got passing games as well. So it's like now we're seeing these skillful elements of the Warriors applied on top of the energy and vigor, which like, I can see how you think Marcelo Montoya has elevated his game because that's the whole team. Like suddenly Pompey is like a physical specimen.
Rising tide, eh? Raises all ships.
It's the Andes. It's the two Andes. They're out here. They're influencing Warriors footy.
Yeah.
And the word that I keep coming back to is consistency. Because the Warriors have basically played when I say like threads through the first 3 games and that kind of stuff, the Warriors have maintained a consistent level across all 3 games. Like they are playing with the same level of energy across all 3 games. So they are consistently showing up with the same energy. They are consistently showing up with the same skill level, the same effort in defense, and effort in support plays, and effort in execution. So it's like, okay, there's a thread through all 3 games to start the season. That is consistency. And the thing about NRL is, can you show up with the same like desire to get smashed every week? And that requires consistency. And I think the Warriors, like they are playing with a high level of energy, which doesn't feel sustainable, but somehow Andy Webster has it in a space where the Warriors can churn that out every single week.
Which led to a close, but probably maybe not as close as the scoreline suggested, because the Knights did score first in that game. Have they conceded first in every game, actually, the Warriors?
Yeah.
I think they have, eh? Knights did, Cowboys did, and Roosters also did. In fact, they've all been tries within the first 10 minutes, so there's something to fix.
Well, it doesn't matter because they outlast the team.
They outlast teams, but it'd also be nice if you don't start from behind. But it is an impressive thing that hasn't been like, because previous Warriors teams, and it's not just the Warriors, like teams that don't have confidence in their ability to win, you score or you concede inside the first 5 to 10 minutes, it can often get ugly. And the fact that hasn't shaken them, and they have responded 3 times out of 3, twice going on to win, and once not going on to win, but putting themselves in a position to win against a good team. That's impressive in itself. Like there's an obvious thing to work on there, but it's also the response to conceding early has not been to drop their heads in any of these 3 games, not even against the Roosters, who we know are quite a good team, and they were playing away from home in that game, and they did go on to lose, but they battled through, which was nice.
So that's a product of showing up with the same energy.
Definitely.
Like, as long as that consistency is there, like conceding early, like yeah, you're slow starters, but consistency over 80 minutes and then doing that for all 3 games, that's how you win games in the NRL. Because there's going to be games where you're off skill as far as skill wise and execution, but showing up with the same energy every week is going to put you in a good position. And yeah, like they have gone down, but at no stage at all this season have the Warriors felt like they are being dominated regardless of the score, which is always a good sign to not be dominated. The Bulldogs, so I reckon the Warriors have a better forward pack than the Bulldogs. I reckon the Warriors have better halves than the Bulldogs. I think Shans Nickel-Clockstart is a better fullback than Hayes Perham, as much as I love Hayes Perham. Like, I think the Warriors also have a powerful bench, which is going to be quite useful against this Bulldogs forward pack. And And as far as like how the Warriors are playing footy, something to keep it on. Like, you got passing middle forwards to shuffle those middle forwards around in the opponent team and the Bulldogs team, but you also got power, so you can dent through the middle. You can target the gaps in the middle as well through the passing, all of which then creates space out wide. So then you're putting Tamaito Martin in a 3v2 situation. Like, Adam Pompey was 1-on-1 against Valentine Holmes, bumped him off, got an offload try. Like, Shans Nickel-Krokstad's fullback and his agility and balance is elite. And so if he's 1-on-1, he might poke through. So you can see how it's all coming together, but it all kind of starts in the middle and how powerful the Warriors are through the middle. And when you combine that power with passing, then you're getting into some funky areas for the Warriors. And the Bulldogs are a good team. They haven't shown the same consistency as the Warriors. I don't think they've shown the same skill level as far as that power and passing goes.
No, I'm just looking at the Bulldogs results, and they got smoked by what I suspect will be a very good Manly Seagulls team, and they've got dudes back fit and healthy that weren't there last year. So there was definitely a bit of round one fizz on offer there, but the Dogs got smoked by 25 points. But then they bounced back and beat the Storm away, which is extremely difficult to do, even if it was admittedly an understrength Storm team. Then they sort of ground out the win against the Tigers, where Tigers had a bit of a late run in them and made things quite frisky there. And I don't suspect the Tigers are going to be a particularly flashless team this year, because they often aren't. But then the Bulldogs are also trying to build up out of that spot. So not a lot of consistency there. But they have shown at least an ability to, like, if you're going to be inconsistent, you might as well at least have flashes of brilliance in there. And they have had some, like, the win against the Storm was pretty impressive. Where do you think they do sit? Like, because it is a thing where the Warriors and Bulldogs are sort of building, as the reason why you've had them in that comparison is because they're building out from the same place. Like, they were kind of in a similar area. They each signed an assistant from the Penrith Panthers to be their new head coach. Where, like we've talked about where the Warriors sit, where do you think the Bulldogs sit in comparison as far as their rebuild goes?
Exact same spot as the Warriors. Like, they are, I think both of them are trying to come into the top 8, so they'll finish between maybe 6th and, like, it could be disappointing for the Warriors, but 6th and 10th, like regular Warriors zone there. But the wrinkle I'm pondering is, I think the Broncos will eventually drop down into that space as well. So I think the Warriors and Bulldogs are coming up into that space. I think the Broncos will drop down. Unless, of course, the Broncos kick on, which is completely fair. Like, there's a high chance that the Broncos kick on when they are one of the most dominant teams in the NRL this season. Two things slow me down on that trajectory. Last season, Broncos started on fire. They faded. Couldn't really sustain it throughout the season. And they dropped out of the 8 despite being one of the hottest teams to start the season. That is pretty much what is happening this season, right? I think I'm going to come around to being like a full-on celebrator of Reece Walsh. Like, I'm open to it. Certainly open to it. But it's the same thing that I've experienced before. Because when Reece Walsh came to the Warriors, he was doing big dives. He was scoring lots of tries. Everything he's done for the Broncos, Reece Walsh was doing for the Warriors at the start of his Warriors journey. It wasn't sustained throughout his Warriors career. The Warriors kind of sucked, fair play. Like, there's so many caveats and so many argumentative points. It's like, I don't want to get deep into it, but it's just another thing I've seen before. So at the moment, I'm in this zone where there's things I'm drawing upon that I've seen before, that I'm seeing again, and I don't know how to frame them moving forward. But that's just curiosity for the Broncos. I do want to just highlight some young players coming around the NRL. I'll go. The best way to do this might be team by team, just quickly. Eels and Panthers play tonight. Dylan Brown's a young player, starting Kiwis half. Fantastic. Not really liking the Eels kind of bench forward situation because Jura Momasia, Makahisi Makatoa, Wiramu Greg. Makatoa's a bit older. Greg and Momasia, young Kiwi-NRL forwards. They're not going to get much game time under Brad Arthur, but they're there. They're thereabouts. Panthers, best propping duo in the NRL. No worries. Melbourne Storm are kind of struggling, and they have Will Warbrick and Alec MacDonald. Would love to see Warbrick get a positive game, tries, line breaks, all of that stuff. It's been tough for him. Alec MacDonald is a very hard-working Storm forward who I think can do anything in rugby league. Because if he's doing this kind of mahi at the Storm, that's what's going to see you move up the ranks. The Tigers, Asu Kepaoa is coming through at centre. Stafford Toa, apparently he's not good enough to crack that Tigers team, so shout out the Tigers. Dolphins, I always talk about Connolly Lemuelu. He's starting on an edge, which is good for the Dolphins. Broncos, you've got Dean Mariner and Xavier Willison on the extended bench. Again, want to see them play top 17 footy, but they're just outside that team right now. Jordan Ricky is starting edge forward. Cowboys, Griffin Neem, all about him. Titans are a bit more of a veteran Kiwi-NRL team because you got Kieran Foran and Isaac Liu. Fantastic players. Keanu Kinney, live wire fullback. He's always on the extended bench, so he's hunting NRL footy. Sea Eagles, Christian Tuipulotu, young Tongan winger. He's going to play a long time for Tonga. Kalmatualangi, probably going to play a long time for Samoa as well. Bulldogs, Hayes Perham. Knights, Leo Thompson. Raiders, Matthew Tomoko. Dragons, got no one, but they do have Paul Turner starting at fullback in New South Wales Cup. And the Cronulla Sharks, I'm intrigued about Mawane Hiroti, but some of these players, Hayes Perham, Matthew Tomoko, Jordan Ricky, Leo Thompson, Griffin Neem, like these are elite young Kiwi NRL players. And what you're saying about basketball, it's all there with rugby league because, like, okay, we need a new centre. Well, it's Matthew Tomoko's opportunity. Oh, we've lost all of our elite middle forwards. No Fisher Harris, no Joseph Tapine, no Asafa Salamona. The Bromwich brothers are unavailable. Well, we'll just get Griffin Neem, we'll get Leo Thompson, we'll get Jordan Ricky, you know. We got plenty of these lads coming through, so there is plenty of Kiwi NRL depth, and a lot of that depth is going to supply Samoa and Tonga, but you've also got a lot of Māori talent that is going to supply the Aotearoa Kiwis, and it's coming through. Like, folks need to be prepared for a lot of Aotearoa Kiwis depth emerging in the coming seasons.
So who's going to win out of Redcliffe and Brisbane then? It sounds like you're leaning a bit more Redcliffe for the team that have the sustainable performances so far. Brisbane a little less so. I mean, I obviously watched Brisbane closely last week because they played the Dragons, and for 60, 65 minutes, it was a very close game, which I felt like the Dragons had it in them to win. And then Brisbane just did the last 15 minutes thing where it was just like all of the thing that people, all the stuff people have been saying about them with the flashy, dynamic ways of playing had not been on show at all to that point. And then they just got an absolute roll on in the last 15 minutes and scored a bunch of tries. And it actually got quite humiliating as a Dragons fan. But Reece Walsh was all over everything, having been pretty quiet up to that point. It was like, here's the Broncos at their absolute best. But there's also like they didn't show it until the end. So whether that's like, it's certainly not the 80-minute consistency things, whereas it feels like Redcliffe are just a Wayne Bennett team. So we know what to expect from that. You're leaning on the Dolphins to turn them over in the first big old, do we call it a Brisbane derby? I don't know. I was going to say Queensland, but there's two other Queensland teams as well.
Yeah, like they're big up in this derby, but like for the last 5 years, it's all been all Broncos, Cowboys. Like,
yeah,
yes, the Queensland derby was like, as soon as the Dolphins come in, they just kick the Cowboys out. I think you're being quite favorable to the Dragons. Like, the Dragons just couldn't hang around for 80 minutes. Like, regardless of how
Yeah, well, that might well be
everything
true. Like,
everything the Broncos did in the first half just destroyed the Dragons. So, 80-minute game, you know.
it is. It is.
I'm kind of trying to find a balance because, like, NRL footy, a lot of the players are Māori, Polynesian, Indigenous Australian. None of the coaches are. So, like, I'm trying to balance, like, celebrating the coaches, because obviously all the Australian NRL media, they are all half Pākehā, half Palangi, so they're all very old school Aussies, so it's all about the coach, because the coach is white like I am and also as old as I am, so he's someone
the same age and demographic.
The coach is me, so I'm going to celebrate the coach.
And also, half the time they played with the coach, or they've been mates for 20 years and stuff. Like, there's a direct link too.
So I'm trying to find a balance. Like, at the end of the day, the players who are Polynesian and Māori and Indigenous Australians, they are the players who perform. They win the games. They do the tackling. They do the running, and we should always focus on them. We should always celebrate the players first and foremost, rather than putting the coach on a pedestal. Then again, rugby league is a bit of a weird game. We always talk about how simple it is, and it's often the coach who has, like, the coach who can deploy the best emotional control and connect with the players and celebrate the players' culture and all that stuff that makes a good team culture and a good team environment. I think in rugby league specifically, it can be extremely influential. And I just think Bennett's better than Walters. So probably going to roll with Bennett and the Dolphins, especially, like, say the Broncos are playing this next season and Dean Mariner's the starting centre, Xavier Willison's coming off the bench, you got Jordan Ricky starting as edge forward, you got Jesse Arthurs as a winger, then I might love the Broncos. But the Broncos have a limited Kiwi-NRL flavour. Dolphins, full-on Kiwi-NRL flavour. They are a fresh tub of Fresh Up or Just Juice or Raro Juice, whatever juice you want it. They got the Kiwi-NRL juice and they got Wayne Bennett. So, I don't know. Just going to roll with the Dolphins, kind of because of the Bennett factor. But I also love that Kiwi-NRL juice that the Dolphins have as well. This weekend, we have Blackcaps versus Sri Lanka ODI cricket. First game Saturday, second game Tuesday. Then we come back on next Friday with the third ODI. And I believe these games are part of the ODI Super League, the Cricket World Cup Super League. And we did see that table. I do remember seeing that table on the test broadcast. And apparently Sri Lanka have a lot to play for. So Sri Lanka are 10th. I think it's a top 8 situation, qualified directly for the World Cup. So Sri Lanka have a lot to play for. The Blackcaps are 2nd. So again, instead of, like, moaning about how much the Blackcaps suck, they always make World Cup semi-finals and finals, and they're here 2nd in the ODI World Cup Super League. So they're all right. They're a good ODI team, and it'll be very interesting what happens in this series wildcard, because we do have, like, a B team for the Blackcaps, and this is part, we talked about this on the Patreon podcast on Tuesday. We debriefed the Blackcaps versus Sri Lanka test series, but also mapped out some of the Blackcaps development pipelines, because these are the series in the past that Trent Bolt didn't play. Kane Williamson didn't play these series. Tim Southey didn't play these series. Like, we've already had these players managed previously. And now we come into a series where, yeah, cool. All those guys want to go IPL. Happy days, all good. This is a Blackcaps development exercise. Same way the Blackcaps toured to India earlier this year over January, where they got rolled, and Henry Shipley was playing, and Ben Lister was playing, and Blair Tickner was playing. Nothing more than a development exercise, and that's where we are for this series against Sri Lanka. But you do have a Sri Lanka team. They are frothing to play because they need to win games and qualify directly for the World Cup. And I'm curious about which young players, which emerging players you are interested in for this series, Nico, because we do have Rachin Ravindra's in, Henry Shipley's playing, Ben Lister's playing, Chad Bowes has been selected. Which one of those kind of emerging players really tickles your Blackcaps antenna?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the league table, so remind me to come back to that after I answered this question because I've noticed something something rather interesting about that. But I mean, looking at the squad, it's like the most intriguing players for me personally are a little more like the Will Young types, where it's like you've been in and out. And Will Young has 2 ODI centuries as well. Like that's the thing that's completely forgotten about Will Young, as he turned up. It might have even been twice in a row against Bangladesh in a series last summer. And obviously has been like people have been calling for him to get a nudge in the test team, and it hasn't quite come around for him. And Henry Nichols just scored a double hundred, so it might not come around for him again. But he has got prior form in ODIs, and he should get a good run here. But just specifically on the younger and inexperienced guys that we're talking about, it's got to be the bowlers, and it's probably got to be the seam bowlers, seeing as that just seems to be like an area where New Zealand cricket hasn't had to worry for quite a while because we've had such good stocks. And it's not like the shelves are empty now. It's just a matter of like there's a little bit of a refreshing. We got to go to the supermarket for a hit up Foursquare for a little top up kind of thing. So it's Shipley and it's Lister. And I think it's probably a little more Lister than it is Shipley, specifically because of the left-handed aspect. I just think we've been spoiled for a long time with Trent Boult as an ODI bowler. Trent Boult will be back for the World Cup by the sounds of it. It might be the only time we see him play for the Blackcaps again, but that just means like we've seen what it looks like without him for a little while now, and there's just not a lot of high end left armers in domestic cricket at the moment, and Ben Lister is the one who has like the one dude who's like a reliable left armer who has consistent years of doing it. Like there's a few good dudes who have had a good season or are pushing through and will have several good seasons if you just give them a bit more time. But Lister seems like the dude who has been around long enough to catch the Blackcaps eye in a more like the selector's eye in a more like I don't know, permanent way, just because you know how much they like the dudes who can do it year after year, and he's got that.
Just so
I don't remember if it was him or Shipley I looked up, and the 50 over format was their worst statistical. I can't remember which one that was, but
both of them.
So both of them. Well, there you go.
So that you're comparing Lister to Boult, but the thing I would share with all the with the audience and yourself, watching the series is don't expect anything Boulty from Lister.
Yeah, definitely.
Lister isn't going to swing the ball into the right-handers. He's probably not going to swing the ball because he's got a completely different style. He is a lefty, but he's got a very different style to Boult, because what Lister has done in domestic cricket, the reason he's got a bit of X factor is he moves the ball away from right-handers and he angles it back into left-handers. So think about Trent Boult. Trent Boult bowls in swing, in swing, in swing, 3/4 seam, going across the right-hander. That is kind of Ben Lister's stock delivery. He's got a quirky release, he's got a quirky seam angle, and it's very effective because he's nibbling the ball away from right-handers and he's attacking the off-stump to left-handers. So it is an interesting skill set for Ben Lister, but don't expect him to be hooping the new ball a la Trent Boult. And to your point about the seam depth, Brett Randall and Will O'Rourke are selected in the New Zealand A team, along with Doug Bracewell, Jacob Duffy, Scott Kugelheim. So you do have, like, we are starting to see the seam bowling depth mapped out for us. Bracewell and Kugelheim just played Test cricket. Lister, Shipley, they're not even in the Test equation, so you can kind of see the pecking order there. Jacob Duffy is a factor, in all cricket. But then you've got Will O'Rourke, very tall seamer from Canterbury, and Brett Randall, again, quirky release, quirky seam position for Central Districts. He can nibble the ball either way. And you're seeing, well, you take a bigger picture, all the players in the IPL, all those type of lads, there's at least 10 seamers across these levels of Blackcaps cricket. So that will be on display in this ODI series. Like, sorry to interrupt, but I do want to kind of frame it this way as well. Still got Latham, still got Matt Henry. Henry Nichols is in the mix. He's in the mix. Let's just say that he's in the mix. So he's got an opportunity in this format, but and Tom Blundell. So you've still got Daryl Mitchell. You've still got this core Blackcaps high-performing group of cricketers in this series to lead most of their mahi.
A couple other dudes who will be playing the first game as well, but not the others when they leave for IPL duties. I think
as soon as
Finn
I see
Allen,
that,
Glenn Phillips, dudes like that.
As soon as I see that, I just take them out of the equation.
Yeah, but it's nice, particularly if you're someone like myself who will be going to the Eden Park game, and it's nice to actually see it. Like, I'd rather see Finn Allen than not see Finn Allen. So, but also you can't think of him.
See your cricketing heroes.
No, I just more. I wouldn't say that, but it's just a. Yeah,
what were you saying
Park,
about
you want to see some balls hit into the stand?
Yeah, it's Eden Park. No worries about that.
Exactly.
What were you saying about the Super League?
Well, yeah, because I heard the same thing about Sri Lanka have got work to do because they need to win a couple games in order to qualify, which looking at the table, they actually need to win 2 games because it's a weird one. I got confused because I was looking at it being like, where's the bloody points per game column? And then it turns out there is no points per game column because strangely for the ICC, they've designed a format in which everyone actually ends up playing the same number of games as everyone else. It's still the ICC, so you don't actually play everyone else. You get 8 series, 4 home, 4 and away, and there's 13 teams, so you can work that out. You play 8 of the 12 available teams that you could have. So there's that factor, but Sri Lanka have, it seems, been Sri Lanka were deducted 2 points for a slow over 8 against the West Indies and 1 point for a slow over 8 against India. It's very serious. So they're 3 points down on where they should be, which is quite a blow for them because it means if they win, the 10 points will take them up to 87, which is still 1 behind West Indies. And also, South Africa have 5 more games to play and are probably going to overtake West Indies as well. And no one else can catch Afghanistan, believe it or not, who with 11 wins, 3 losses, and 1 no result have already qualified. They're sitting in 7th. So West Indies, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Ireland are competing for the one last spot, and it's probably going to go to South Africa because they got the most games in hand. So Sri Lanka have something to play for, something quite big to play for, but they're not going to get it. Like realistically, they're not going to win 2 games, or I guess a win and a no result would put them technically up, and then they just have to hope that. Oh, actually, I don't even know. South Africa might be playing Sri Lanka, in which case, Ireland or something, which might doom them. Anyway, but the Blackcaps have more to play for because they're sitting second, as you say, but England have finished. England are on 155 points. They've played their 24 games. They won 15 of them. They had a no result, 8 losses. Blackcaps have played 21. This is their last series in this thing. They're 5 points behind England. You get 10 points for a win. Behind New Zealand is India, who are on 139 because they've also had a point docked off for a slow over 8 at some point, which is effectively the tiebreaker in the favor of the Blackcaps because it means if India if the Blackcaps win 3-0, 2-1, and India win 3-0 in whatever their last series is probably the game that's going on at the moment against Aussies, isn't it? Which would mean that they've already lost 2 of those. So that's probably not happening. Bangladesh at 20 points and Pakistan 20 points. Australia might be able to catch Australia. If Australia and the Blackcaps win all their remaining games, then Australia would probably finish ahead on net run rate. So there is that factor. But maybe Australia won't win all their games. Or New Zealand might just thrash Sri Lanka and nudge it up because it's relatively close with just a shade under 0.7 and they're 0.74-ish. So the Blackcaps aren't like the Black Caps are the team that seems. I don't know if you get anything for winning the Super League um, qualifying phase. Probably not, but it's something to aim for, and they can easily finish first if they have three nice, solid victories against Sri Lanka, as they often tend to do, and they're very good at ODI cricket still. And it is a weakened team, so there's that aspect to consider. But they're playing for first spot on the standings. Sri Lanka are playing for a last fading hope, like lantern on the horizon distance kind of thing, like desperation zone. Maybe we finish eighth and don't have to do a qualifying thing for the World Cup. It seems like one of those things is actually a lot more realistic, but also a lot more, I don't know, like tangible, go out there and achieve it. We know what we're aiming for kind of thing than the other. And it's the Blackcaps shooting for first. That's seems like it should be the focus of the series.
South Africa are playing Netherlands next, so that will probably sort itself out. And this reminds me of how important that Pakistan league was earlier in the summer.
Yeah,
the Black Caps went to Pakistan. They had 2 draws. So that set them up. Sure, you would have liked to win a test in Pakistan, but that never really happens. It rarely happens in history of Kiwi cricket. 2 draws, then comes into the Kiwi summer. You get 3 wins, 1 loss. You move up to mid-table in the World Test Championship ladder. And the Black Caps won the ODI series in Pakistan afterwards with a full-strength ODI team. That took them up to second. Couple wins here, they'll go to first, as you were describing. So I think that Pakistan series was a bit of out of sight, out of mind, even though it was on Sky, as opposed to all the other stuff that has been on Spark because it was overseas. But I think that Pakistan series was quite crucial. Just one other thing on some of the development stuff for Black Caps cricket. You've also got the kind of spin situation mapped out because, yep, some lads are away. ODI squad to face Sri Lanka has Ish Sodhi and Rachin Ravindra. So you've got a frontline spinner and you've got Rachin Ravindra as a spin bowling all-rounder. He replaces Michael Bracewell, who's probably going to go to the IPL and smash sixes, barely bowl, and come back as like a batting superhero after a test stint where he's barely scored runs, but he's taken wickets, and it's all really interesting. The A squad has Ajaz Patel and Aditya Ashok. So you can kind of see the spin rankings mapped out. Also got the batting rankings mapped out as well, because you've got all these lads who are in the ODI squad. Mark Chapman comes into the squad. You got Tom Blundell as the backup, as the wicketkeeper. You got Chad Bowes, like, big up Tim Seifert. Hopefully he gets back into the mix at some stage. He's obviously not there right now. But Chad Bowes is in the equation. Will Young's in the equation. All those lads are there. Then you go to the A squad. You've got really solid next up batters as far as Cole McConchie, Rob O'Donnell, Tom Bruce, Cam Fletcher as a wicket-keeping option. Then it drops down a tier to Henry Cooper, who's been a pretty solid, steady domestic performer in all 3 formats for Northern Districts. You've got Sean Solier also in that bracket. Then you go a bit younger. You got Mitch Hay. You got Dean Foxcroft. And those type of lads with the bat as intriguing youngsters coming into the A team. So it's like the young players in the middle class, they make up the A team. The best performers from that group, they are the guys who are playing in the ODI squad against Sri Lanka. And then it just opens up to the top tier who are taking some time out of Black Caps cricket. Big up to them.
I do have to make an amendment on what I was just saying, because if I paid any attention to this ODI Super League table before, then I might have understood this. But I'm looking at the thing to try to figure out who was playing next. And it actually isn't the case that India have another series or Australia have 2 more series, because they've just played fewer games because Australia cancelled their tour to Afghanistan, and South Africa also didn't go to Australia where they were scheduled to. India didn't go to Afghanistan either, I think, or Afghanistan didn't go to India. I can't remember which one. So I think they just don't reschedule those, which means that I think all the Black Caps have to do is win 1 game to finish ahead of England. And be the top qualifying team for the World Cup, which I don't know, maybe they get better seedings or who knows. But I don't think they get a mace. I think you get a mace for that one. But it would be something to brag about. Finish top of the ODI Super League standings. Where are we? 14-5 with two no results from 21 games. It's a pretty strong record, especially if you can nudge that up to say 16-6 or 17-5. Like, there's nothing wrong with that form, particularly when we know that they have rotated dudes along the way. Like, it's not that they've been picking it's not like the test situation where you pick your best 11 for every game because every game is that event kind of thing. We don't play often enough. It's how it goes. They've had situations where they've been full strength. They've also had situations like this series against Sri Lanka where they're not going to be full strength, and we'll see probably, hopefully at least, we're hoping to see the sort of second tier guys and a couple of probably third tier guys step up and perform in the absence of the others. So, I mean, they should have a mace for whoever wins the ODI Super League, obviously, because we're going to finish first, which would be clearly beneficial. But I don't know. It's another bragging point for the Blackcaps.
I have felt this kind of dooming. I don't know what it is. I think it might just be like a lot of Kiwi cricket fans want the Blackcaps to suck. Like, they want Kiwi cricket to fail. Like, I catch that vibe. And obviously, if there is a stinky Kiwi sports team, if there's a stinky Kiwi sports situation, we'll talk about it negatively. We've done it plenty of times before, but it's all about what is warranted and what isn't. Because I feel like a lot of the men's cricket stuff, a lot of people want it to be how it was, where everything just made no sense, where there was no depth, where there was minimal amount of world-class players, and all these old ideas about Blackcaps cricket don't apply now. The Blackcaps are one of the best cricket teams in the world, despite of our minuscule population compared to other cricket playing nations. We've talked about it a lot, like World Cup semi-finals and finals, where you win a World Test Championship. Of course they didn't back that up because they lost half their team from the World Test Championship. Like, all of this stuff kind of makes sense. But if, like, to maybe put a bow on it, what happens if this group of B team cricketers rolls Sri Lanka 3-0? Like, no one can view Kiwi cricket negatively when you take in the bigger picture stuff, like everything we've talked about the Blackcaps this summer, going to Pakistan, bouncing back in Aotearoa with everyone hates that Blackcaps test team, but they won 3 games in a row. Like, I don't know, what more do you want? Yeah, there's no young players necessarily cracking into the team and all this other stuff that gets used to portray the Blackcaps negatively. Where, like, okay, your B team is going to defeat Sri Lanka. Like, if that happens, I might be jumping the gun, getting a bit into my arrogant Kiwi vibe here, but if that were to happen, I think it is a fantastic representation of Kiwi cricket. A more logical conclusion is that, like, Sri Lanka playing in New Zealand, they've got a lot to play for, but they are playing ODI games in New Zealand, which has been tough for them in the past. A logical, reasonable conclusion is that it's a hard-fought series. Sri Lanka might win, the Kiwis might win. All good. That represents Kiwi cricket as well, because you've got a B team competing well against the first 11 Sri Lankan outfit. So Blackcaps roll Sri Lanka, like, I think the depth of Kiwi cricket is all right, you know? Like, I think we're doing all right for little old Aotearoa. Let's get into football.
Let's talk about the depth of Kiwi football. Yeah.
I wanna leave your all white stuff for the last bit. I want to kind of cage you up and just let you go with the all whites. Wind you up and let you go. Because we do have Wellington Phoenix women. So the men are on a brief hiatus, but we do have Wellington Phoenix women, and this is quite an interesting time for the Wellington Phoenix women. They are playing a lot of games over the next week or so. You're always quick to tell me that they're facing Newcastle, who are a spot ahead of them on the A-League ladder. it is quite funny that we're doing like this big old segment about the Wellington Phoenix women and they are dead last in the A-League women's ladder. But I think that is to your point that this is a quite an interesting phase for the Wellington Phoenix women with winnable games and developing performances. Is that like, let me set this up with a specific question. Why is this an interesting period for Wellington Phoenix women?
Well, for starters, it's the last week of their season because there's only 3 games left, and they've got to play them all in the space of like 7 days. So that's quite important. Um, it's also like so I think they play on Saturday evening, something like that, against Newcastle away. So that's huge because Newcastle are the team they can catch. Newcastle are one spot ahead of them on the ladder. If they play the way they've been playing in recent games, which I've got no reason to think they won't, then they'll at least have the performance to be able to get a win in that game. Even if it's a draw, they're not out of the question. If they lose, that would be a little bit of a disaster because that pretty much confirms them as wooden spooners again. But if they do draw, they do still have a game in hand, which they'll play on Tuesday night in Adelaide. And Adelaide are about 4 spots ahead of them. They're okay, but they're beatable. Like the kind of game they might be able to get something out of. So it's not the end of the world if they draw against Newcastle, but definitely that's the game you want to win. And then after that, they have their last game of the season, which is at home against Melbourne Victory, who are on the fringes of that top 4. So that is probably, I mean, they beat Sydney FC a couple of weeks ago, a big upset, first losing to last. So it's not out of the question, but I think that'd be a very tough game to get anything from, even if it is at home against the Melbourne Victory, because they are going to need to win that game to make the semi-finals. And Melbourne Victory are 2-time defending champions as well. So it's not like they don't have big game pedigree. They've not got all the players that they had through all of those, because players do well in the A-League, they go to bigger leagues. That's how it works. It's a stepping stone kind of competition. Um, it's they've still got enough of them. They've still got enough star players to be able to expect something out of that. Not the least of which being Claudia Bunge at centre back. Um, it's there's 3 games in 7 days: Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, and those 3 games will pretty much. I don't know if they can finish 10th and not get the wooden spoon. I think you can almost call this a successful season. There's obvious things that you don't want to be settling for that for too long, but given the way they started, that would mean quite a lot to the team, and it would be a nice, just tangible reward for a lot of their efforts. Moving into next season, there's already hints that maybe they just have to sacrifice a Kiwi player or two and get a couple imports in, because you have to be able to put the ball in the net. And so many of these other teams are in similar positions, play similar styles of football, similar standard of football to the Wellington Phoenix women, but they just have like a random American striker who'll make sure to convert a chance or two per game. And the Phoenix don't have that, so they keep losing 1-0 when they're playing quite well. It's so often the difference between 3 points and no points. It makes such a big swing. And so we might see that next season. But for this season, like it took them longer than they should have to get up to the standard again. That was a frustrating thing. I think their preseason was hard because they weren't playing against other A-League teams. They were playing against just local teams. Big jump up. They caught them off guard a bit. But, I mean, this is it. 7 days to try make the most of what's left in the season. If they can finish 10th, get above Newcastle, I think that's a relative success for them.
Yeah, you're talking about next season, you're talking about earlier this season. What about the next week? Who are the players who are going to help the Phoenix win games right now? Who are the best players? Who are you interested in? Keep it present, short-term focus. How do the Wellington Phoenix women win these games? And who are the players you're most interested in over the next week?
Well, who wants to score some goals, basically? Like it's almost that simple. Everything else is humming quite nicely. They're defending pretty well. They're a lot better in possession than they have been. I think they've found good balance in their midfield, good balance across their back line. Granted, Edwards has come on and leaps and bounds from the start of the season to where she is now as a goalkeeper. Still haven't seen Lily Orfeld as well. We're at the point where she's probably just going to have missed the entire season, which means they didn't have their captain at any point in this campaign, which is another thing to consider. But yeah, the thing that tips them over between what they've been doing and what they can still achieve, and having something to play for going into the last week of the season is also, even if it's just as simple as like, don't finish last, that's still something to play for. It's an important thing to have at this stage of the season. So yeah, the difference is just, can they get the ball in the back of the net? So to that point, Betsy Hassett is their smartest, most technical, most creative player. And when she moved from a central midfield role into more of a number 10 playmaker role, it was the sort of secret weapon to the team, being able to score some goals, create more chances, just be more sustainable in their attacks. She'll be important. Players like we'll see what the balance is, because I thought Paige Satchel played quite well last week, but she's such a frustrating player because she does amazing things and then can't cross or shoot, so it sort of doesn't lead to anything. But her energy definitely was a big important thing in both the last two games. But maybe the lack of finishing might mean Millie Clegg comes back into start, or it could be a thing where it's what they've been doing, like Satchel plays an hour, and then Clegg comes on as the option one way or another. I think Emma Ralston as a central forward is something we never really got until the most recent game, and I think there's potential there to be unlocked. Michaela Robertson has probably been their most consistent performing attacker throughout the season. She's another one where it's like everything's so good, but then you just gotta, the finishing needs to just be a bit sharper. You gotta miss the keeper with those shots. You got to get them into the corners rather than down the middle, and just little things like that. Where I think Robertson's got an incredible goal scoring record at club level here, so she's obviously someone who can score goals. It's not as much of a technical issue with her. I think it's just, as a team, there's a bit of self-consciousness in front of goal. You go to shoot and you're too worried about, this one has to go top corner. This has to be the perfect finish because we need this goal desperately. And you just, if you're in your head in those kind of moments, like I think most strikers will tell you, the goals flow when you're not even thinking about it. You're just doing routines you've practiced over and over and over. It's like muscle memory, shoot, score. I know where the goal is. I know where I'm aiming for. I know what the goalkeeper's showing me. And I can do this stuff in my sleep with my eyes closed. When you start thinking about it and getting self-conscious, that's when you drag shots or hit them straight at the keeper and things like that. I think it's just a matter of confidence with a few of these players, at least to get them to where they need to be. Then you start talking about next season and signing an import striker or someone who can do this. But yeah, I mean, there's a grab bag of attackers you can pick from. It's just whoever can put the ball in the back of the net. It's open season. Whoever wants to be the hero, well, here's your chance.
We've also got the All Whites playing against China. And it's a big old couple of days for Mount Smart Stadium. Got the All Whites playing there on a Thursday. Then you got the Warriors Club Day against the Bulldogs. All three grades are playing at Mount Smart on Sunday. All Whites are playing tonight, Thursday. So that's kind of why we've got them in this segment here. Plenty of niche cage content about the squad. That is all live. There'll be plenty of content coming out over the next few days about the All Whites as well. They do play in Wellington again on Sunday. So you got two games against China. Got like an interim coach situation. Looks like a pretty strong All White squad. What are some key points? Got a nice time restriction here to add some pressure on you. You're in front of goal here. You got some pressure on you last few seconds of the game.
Keepers closing out.
You just talk some shit about trying to put it into the top corner and all this. Like, just get it into the goal here. What are some key points about the All Whites versus China series that you're thinking the most about?
Well, funnily enough, it's the same thing, because it's not just a Wellington Phoenix problem about not scoring goals. It's also a Football Ferns problem about not scoring goals. And it's been an All Whites problem about not scoring goals. So they're playing China. From what I gather, China's not been in the best state with their like men's football team. It seems to be. I wrote a bit more about this in the preview for people who want to actually like check out. They do have a new coach though. They have had some pretty poor results. They've had a few scandals in the boardroom when it comes to the team and this kind of stuff. So they're I guess starting a bit of a rebuild. I'm not really sure, but we'll see what that looks like. Very domestically based team for China as well. So it's not like It's not like they've got a dude in the Premier League of Chris Wood's caliber or anything like that. I expect them to all be pretty solid professionals, but like there might not be the superstar above them. Whereas I think our team fluctuates where we've got a few guys who are probably below the Chinese professional level, but also a couple guys who would be above it. So um, a little more all over the place. We'll see. There is always a trick when it comes to guys having to fly all the way from Europe back to New Zealand to play. They might not be fit for to start in the first game, or they might not be like just after the jet lag, or if they get in late or whatever. It might be a case of having to come off the bench or just maybe starting but not finishing the game. A little bit of balance to that, but I do think it's a relatively strong all white squad. And to the point about scoring goals, they have had since the Australian series. Marco Rojas is back in there, and Costa Barbarouses is back in there. Costa might not be the best example lately because he's missed a couple goobers for the Phoenix fellas, but they've got options. And I think Chris Wood will be okay. We'll see how that goes. I don't want to speculate too much, but I think if there was any serious doubt about him being able to play, he just wouldn't be here. So I think he's all right. It's not like he had a serious injury. He just got kicked in the knee and it swelled up. So it was more like just bruising over a joint kind of issue. You got to wait for it to go down, and then once it does, you'll be all right. I mean, it is a case like it looked like Chris Wood might be in doubt for a while. Tommy Smith hasn't played for a few weeks, but it sounds like that was more because like he's ready to go now. It's just timed up for the international break rather than the last club game. Don't know that he's necessarily be a starter, but Alex Grieve was under some injury suspicion. He returned a lot earlier than first suspected. Like there has been a rare bit of convenience. So talk a bit about how the football ferns seem to always have players like key players injured when they play. And a few of them are coming back around as well. Like it does seem to be certainly a theme of the last flying Kiwis. Because even outside of the All White squad, you have had Ryan Thomas and Sarpreet Singh getting back into playing regular club football again. They're not quite ready for flying halfway around the world and playing internationals and flying back, but they're in good places, playing games, playing quite well as well. It seems like we might be in slightly more fortunate times with as far as some of the injuries that have pestered around, and to be honest, contributed to both of those teams struggling to score goals. But yeah, man, I just want to see the All Whites score put the ball in the back of the net a few times. And China is hopefully the kind of team they should be able to do it against. And I think if Chris Wood plays, he will be extremely influential in that. And ideally, we don't have such a reliance on the one guy for all the goals. But we do. And at least that's where it needs to start from. Other guys have got to catch up to him. It's not a matter of taking Chris Wood out and being like, okay, the rest of you, like, chucking a baby into a swimming pool and be like, learn how to swim now. It's more, let's see how we can facilitate Chris Wood. Let's see how we can play off him. Let's see what we can build around, because that's the one thing the All Whites have that the football ferns don't have is they have a superstar striker who plays at a really high level and has maybe not of late a good goal scoring record, but certainly over his career, over the last 5 years, a really, really good goal scoring record. That's just an enormous luxury. And to have that's where it starts for the All Whites. It doesn't have to be where it ends. You can get other fellas being creative around him. If he's sucking in defenders, well, there's room for your wingers out wide. There you go. But it's the one thing where both these national teams have this overwhelming issue of not being able to score goals, but they always have a clear path to how they can fix that because they have Chris Wood.
There doesn't seem to be any lingering yucky, stinky vibes from the coaching situation. And I think like all the teams we're talking about, they've got coaches where you're seeing the players are playing for that coach, the Breakers, Phoenix, Warriors, Wayne Bennett and the Dolphins. Like a lot of these teams we've talked about, they are showing that they are playing for the coach. You could have predicted that the situation around Danny Hay not being the coach, that the players might be falling off their willingness to partake. I don't think they're going to. Well, you never know with football. Like, you never know who's going to reject a call up to represent Aotearoa because, as you said, you got to fly around the world. Like, it is a tricky, niggly thing to partake in. But with an interim coach, Darren Baisley.
Yeah.
There doesn't appear to be any lingering bad vibes there. Like all the players are on board with whatever he's trying to do as interim coach.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I hadn't. There is like because he was an assistant for Danny Hayes, so there's some crossover there, and I think they've also done that very standard interim coach thing where it's like you see this in the Premier League all the time, whether you sack a coach and it's like, well, we don't have time to get a new one in, so what we'll do is we'll just get an old player or an assistant to take over, surround them with old players, and it's just really boost up the cultural side of things to really give people that mental refresh as much as anything. You're not got time to do anything tactically drastic or anything, but you've got that with the All Whites here very clearly, where it's like, okay, we don't have a coach, but previous assistant Baisley is just going to step up. He's going to handle this tour, and we're going to bring in Glenn Moss as a goalkeeping coach. We're going to bring in Simon Elliott, and we're going to bring in Rory Fallon, who himself was also a part of the coaching staff before. All three of them part of that 2010 World Cup squad, which Chris Wood and Tommy Smith would be the only two players remaining that were also at that World Cup, now that Winston Reid's retired. So it's very much like, that's why I think they have been able to keep that thing. Is it's like, let's boost up the old boys stuff. Let's just make sure everyone appreciates what they're doing. And Tommy Smith said some really nice words about how much it means to him and how he kind of regrets instances in the past where he's not wanted, like where he's opted out of representing the All Whites. Back in the Hudson days, those were weird days. It's a bit different now. So, but yeah, I think you raise a very good point because it hasn't been an issue leading into this tour, and it very well could have been.
Lovely jubbly. That is the niche cast for this week. Enjoy all the Aotearoa sporting action. Enjoy yourself and your own existence here in Aotearoa. Big up, kia kaha, stay beautiful, cha-cha.